Hi everyone. So this is Peter, and for this video, I'm gonna do the book review of our final project, Sweetness and Power. So before I do my presentation, I'd like to apologize for being away from the class and wasn't focused enough on the class, which I'd like to thank Professor for giving me this chance to give me the exception do this final by my own. And so let's begin. So sweetness and power. How does the sugar change the world? And for the book review, I divided the book review into 5 parts: introduction, main thesis, evidence of thesis, strength and weakness, and general opinion. So the first part, introduction. What is the book about? So this book. So before I introduce this book, let's learn something about the author and the background. So this book, Sweetness and Power, is a groundbreaking sociology and history work, and it was published in 1985 by Sidney W. Mintz, which is a great author. And the central idea of this book, I divided categorized central ideas into 3H, which is three how. So the first how is how sugar transformed from a rare luxury for noble class to an everyday necessary for the working class. And the second how is how sugar changed the economy system, labor system, and colonization, which these three systems changed the whole history process of our world. And the third how is how sugar affects people's food culture and daily life. So that's basically three central ideas this book is about. And let's move on to the second part, main thesis. And how do those theses relate to things we learn in the class? So the book's main thesis is sugars transform from a luxury to a daily necessary. So before I introduce the main thesis, I think we all need to know that this transformation is not a natural evolution, it's a direct reflection of the expansion of capitalism among the world. So it's not a natural process, but instead is a process that human caused. And for the main thesis, I think we can look at the thesis from 3 different perspectives. First is economy perspective. So as we all know in the book, there are cheap slave laborers in the plantation in the Caribbean Sea, which provide cheap sugar for British. And this kind of trading shaped the colonial economy structure and lasted for a very long time in this world. And also, the cheap sugar become a reason for the later industrial revolution in British, which I will introduce later in the book review why this becomes the reason. And the second perspective is the sociology and culture perspective. So the increase of importing sugar makes sugar accessible to public, which become a daily necessary, as I said before, and the public start to mimic habits of noble classes. For example, they start drinking tea with sugar, and before that, most working class drinking tea just pure tea. They just drink very thick and very strong pure tea without anything. And now they start adding sugar because noble does. And this kind of mimic unconsciously makes them adopted the lifestyle and the social value of capitalism, which became a background of later capitalism's spreading worldwide. And also, sugar brought enough energy for working class, which answers my question before. Why is this is the reason of the Industrial Revolution? Because sugar brought enough energy for working class, and it led to the Industrial Revolution because the production rate of working class is increasing because of the enough energy. And also, cheap sugar brought routines such as tea break, because now drinking tea with sugar become a daily habit for many people. So there's a tea break in the afternoon, which is also used in many companies nowadays among the world. And the third perspective is the history perspective. So the sugar's production, which is from the cheap plantation and the consumption, which is the daily habits of British working class, has already formed a complete cycle of exploitation, which forms a new global trading system that never happened before in the history, which means cheap slaves or laborers in colonial regions. They provide very cheap products and import them into their into countries such as British. And let's move on to the third part, evidences of thesis. So what evidence, what kind of evidence support the author's claim? And also, I think we can look at the evidence of thesis from three different perspectives. So the first perspective is economy and history. So these kind of evidence include trade statistics, tariff records, and price curves during that time, which demonstrate the explosion in British sugar imports and the continued decrease of sugar price during the 18th and 19th century. And the second perspective of evidence is sociology and culture perspective. So besides like trade records, the author also analyzed journals of like plantation owners or records of slaves and letters between merchants, which are all from sociology or culture perspective. So all these records, like slave records, prove how slavery and colonization works, and how do this system work in order to meet the huge demand of European markets. And it's not only sugar. At that time, the European market has a huge demand of different kind of spices, different kind of fabrics, different kind of teas. So these are all from like colonial regions or countries, and all this evidence prove like how this system works to meet the huge demand from a sociology perspective. And the third perspective is the consumer's perspective, and that's the most easy one. They check like families' recipe, the emerge of tea break among working classes, like I said before, and also the image of sugar in literature and artwork changes. So before that, the image of sugar is a representation of wealth and noble, and now the sugar become a symbol of a symbol of simple happiness, which means the sugar is getting into the daily life of working class. And let's move on to the fourth part of my book review, strength and weakness. So in this part, I'm going to discuss what are the good parts of this book and what are some parts that I feel like it need to be improved. And obviously, I'm not a professional researcher or writer, but it's just from my personal perspective that there are some parts the book can be improved. So first, let's talk about the strengths. Uh, I think there are three very obvious strengths for this book. So the first one is that the book combines production, consumption, commercial, and trade together with cultural changes, which is transformative and groundbreaking. So before this book, all the research are doing separate introductions. For example, they're doing like culture in one book, they do economy in one book, and all those researchers are separated. But this book is the first one that connect them together and let people see like, wow, this can be a whole system, and it's like a chain reaction, and one thing changes and affect another. They are not separate. So which changes people's perspective. And the second strength is the book explicitly presents how does the need of sugar lead to a series of changes in the field of culture, the field of history, and economy. So this is basically an expansion for the first point. So the change of sugar is like a chain reaction. The need of sugar is a chain reaction. Because a huge demand of sugar, there's more colonization, and because there's more colonization, it brings like better like shipping techniques and stuff like that. So it's a whole chain reaction. And the third strength is the book combined data with cultural interpretation, explained from multiple perspectives. So the book does not only just introduce data, it connects them together and they quantify the cultural changes. So so like as I introduced before, the book used records of like data such as tariffs or slaves. Both are examples of connecting data with cultural change. And after talking about strengths, now let's talk about the weakness of this book. So for what I think, there are two weaknesses. The first one is the book mainly introduced and focused on the connection between United Kingdom and plantation in Caribbean Sea, which is great, but the book did not include sugar's history in South America countries or Asia countries, because from what I know, sugar's history and transform in these two regions are completely different from what happened in Europe. So the book's conclusion do have a profound meaning, but it lacks universality because there are other regions that just happens differently. And the second weakness is the book highlighting sugar's role in some changes, but the book did not consider if there are other alternative explanations. So let's take the Industrial Revolution as example. So the book gives the reason that because sugar gives working class more energy, which lead to higher production rate, which lead to Industrial Revolution. But the book did not consider maybe if there are some other food was added to workers' recipe during that time. So maybe there are some other regions may cause the increase of working rate except sugar, and the author did not rule those possibilities out, so which makes the conclusion not academically rigorous enough. And so now let's talk about general opinions, my opinions of this book. So overall, I think this book is not just a history about sugar. The book is a documentation of how does the craving of sugar change our society and culture. And to be more explicitly on my opinion, so the book changed the way we see ordinary daily stuff such as sugar or salt or tea or coffee, all those things we see every day in our life. But the book shows that even these little things can change the course of history. And academically, the analysis of the relationship between production and consumption become very important analytical tools in related fields. And also many history materials like trading records, recipes, tariff records, slave records mentioned in the book are important materials when conducting related researches. Okay, so I think we've come to the end of my book review, and I just want to say I learned a lot from our class in this semester, and again, thank you for giving me this chance to do my final project alone, and thank you for listening.